Hi everyone, Gamma here, back after what ended up being a far longer hiatus than I originally intended. My explanation for this, I finally moved after talking about it for quite a while on my personal page. As you can tell by the new background I've got that's slowly taking shape, I have my priorities straight. I got the collectibles set up on their shelves, so they're in like safe, coordinated places. I'm getting on with work. I'm doing well there. I'm settling into my new team, which is great. And after the many complaints I internalized about, not from other people, but mostly because I hated it, the quality of the videos as they were coming out, I wanted to ensure that I had the equipment necessary to create something that was accessible enough and a good enough quality for people to engage with and enjoy. So hopefully that's the case. If it's not good now, that's less to do with the equipment and more because I suck at editing, which hopefully I can only promise that will improve with time. So for those of you who didn't see the post, I've rescheduled sort of the plan for the foreseeable with how I use this page and my platform going forward. So as you can tell, welcome to the first episode of the Cancer Chronicles. So the plan for this series is, rather than what I was doing before, which was creating sort of half-hour, quite chunky segments which were quite full of information, but really quite waffly, we've got these smaller, more targeted videos so that people who are going through treatment and have specific questions, or people who are supporting patients, or who have, in general, just have specific questions about the nature of the illness I experienced, or how some types of treatment work, and just sort of some general knowledge about life with cancer and so on. Hopefully that addresses that issue, and this creates an easier way for you to engage with this content. My plan is also to start live streaming twice a week as well. That'll probably be just a variety of video games. I think I'm coming at it from the angle of trying to appeal to like nostalgia, because after only recently upgrading to a PC, fulfilling like a long-time fantasy of mine, I am only just getting to play a lot of the games that I haven't been able to play for a long time, like Team Fortress and things like that. So it will just be a bit of whatever takes my fancy at the time, and that's with the aim of sort of creating a space for people to come and ask questions, just generally hang out, like the sort of culture we have between the Instagram pages, the ones I used to work with, like the Cancer Clique, where we expressed our stories about illness, and how a lot of the other Instagram pages work. So yeah, hopefully that works, and hopefully that will be enjoyable for everyone. Apologies if I've got a slightly tickly throat, if I cough at all during this. I'm coming down from what we originally thought was coronavirus, but after my test came back negative, we're assuming it's the flu. Shan's the exact same, my partner. We're both sort of feeling a bit under the weather at the moment, so apologies if that affects the way it sounds at all, but I'll try my best not to sound like I'm at death's door, even though I sort of intermediately feel that way. Aware that I've already wasted nearly 5 minutes of just waffling at you. I'm going to get into sort of the first episode. So to go back to the very beginning, which is the most logical place to start, we have to go all the way back to December of 2018, which, having just stumbled into 2021, that's very weird to think that I'm that far ahead into my journey. And for those of you who aren't familiar with my journey, I'm George. I run the page Gamma Stories here on YouTube and Instagram, and I'm a survivor of Ewing's sarcoma, which is a pretty rare, quite gnarly form of bone cancer that affected it was the bone variant. It can also grow as a soft tissue variant on the 8th rib on the right side of my chest. I'm coming up to, I think this weekend actually, a year in remission, which is very surreal, and I enjoy documenting my experiences. I published a book last year now, called The Circle, which is like a composite of my notes about my experiences with illness, sort of which parts suck the most, which parts were, which parts I learned from primarily, sort of with the purpose of trying to pass on a lot of that information to other people who are just starting out their treatment journey, people who are supporting other patients, and generally just the morbidly curious. There's nothing wrong with that as well. I guess everybody's welcome. So we start off in December of 2018. I travel into London, which back before the apocalypse was something that people used to do quite a lot, actually, and it sounds very weird to think that people used to just be able to freely wander around and go and do interesting things rather than just stare at the same four walls all day. So I travelled to Winter Wonderland with my then girlfriend, now fiancée Shannon. Winter Wonderland, for those of you who don't know, like if there's anyone outside the UK watching, is an event that's hosted in London every year, that's themed around Christmas. So it's got a lot of like the stereotypical carnival rides that you might see, a lot of street food, a lot of small businesses, which is always great. There's quite a heavy like Germanic influence on a lot of the aesthetic there, which looks really cool. It's really quite cozy and quite a good time, and I like going there. And hopefully, when the world opens back up and we can start living again, I would like to go back there very soon. So yeah, it's a good time basically. And being as unlucky as we are, or we didn't know how unlucky we were at the time, we decided to go ice skating. And when we did go, it ended up raining quite heavily. We booked it in advance without realising that the heavens were literally going to open on us as we tried to skate. And I'm a terrible skater, but for those of you who may not know, water and ice is not really the best situation if you plan on moving across it. We persevered and tried anyway, and as you can imagine, there was a lot of falling over, stretching into sort of unnatural and uncomfortable positions. Quite funny, quite a lot of embarrassing photos, which I refuse to share here. And when we finally got back from our hotel after, despite the weather was a really awesome evening, it's always fun there, I noticed that beyond sort of the normal aches and pains that you would after that, there was quite a strange sensation running where my rib used to be. It's not there anymore. And that was when I discovered quite, a large lump on the side of my body. And looking back now, like with the context I have now of how chemotherapy and treatment in general affected my tumour once I was, aware of its presence and the threat it posed, it's quite jarring to think how huge it was, like this huge foreign body just existing as part of my own, and it just escaped my notice. So we were initially quite shocked by this and concerned, but humans have this quite self-damaging habit of whenever we're faced with something that could be a real cause for concern, we try and explain it away. And I know that's a coping mechanism. It's, you can't afford to spend every moment panicking about stuff, and you want to be safe in the immediate moment. That's something left from our chimp caveman days, so thank them for that. So I immediately went into explanation mode. There's nothing really to worry about. It will be fine. So after that point, that's sort of when quite a significant amount of pain started to set in. Little did I know at the time that I was actually suffering from a pathological fracture, which is where, and it's part of the way that these types of cancers work. So when you have cancers that affect the bone, the way that I and a lot of people discover that they have these forms of cancer is through breakages. So the cancer grows and it wears down and it applies pressure to the bone that it's growing on to the point where it breaks. And when I later on went and had surgery to address my illness, it was then I understood that I spent quite a significant period of time. So as I go on and through this series talk about more, setting out the journey, you'll understand that I had to spend quite a significant amount of time enduring this intense level of pain from this break, from this pathological break. Just going to get a quick drink. I'm glad it wasn't COVID, but I definitely do feel pretty under the weather. Based on my local expert, WebMD, it's probably flu, which almost feels kind of ironic in a COVID climate, to get the flu. Like, I kind of forgot it existed, so it is very strange to think that that's probably what it is. So, where were we? Yeah, so having to live for quite an extended period of time with that pain, it was quite alarming to. Now it's just strange to think that I spent quite a lot of time with that. And as I talk more about going into trying to get diagnosed and the challenges that came with, that all factored into that part of the journey, because getting diagnosed with an illness can present its own challenges. Of course, I went for an initial X-ray that came back clear, and I spent the next period of time, a few months, sort of compartmentalizing this high level of pain that I was enduring on a daily basis and trying to adapt my lifestyle because it was being interfered with so heavily. And at the time, not knowing just how serious it was, that was only something we understood after a completely separate journey that will probably be the topic of next episode's discussion. So, yeah, it's just very weird to think about with that. So I guess that's probably the core of what I'm trying to talk about, and the reason that I go right back to the beginning, back before I even really understood what that I had cancer, is because when you look at it through the lens of it was a great day out and I had fun there, and in hindsight it was actually a very good opportunity, because that injury was what led to me uncovering the severity of my illness. I dread to think that if it hadn't been for that break, how far my illness could have progressed before it was picked up on. And then plus the potential delays of misdiagnosis and not under this illness not being uncovered despite the efforts of medical professionals. But if you look at what objectively are some pretty normal mundane events, that just through living I uncovered this very sinister threat to my existence. And I think what we can draw from that is that these threats do hide in plain sight, and it's something that, while we don't have the space to always worry about it and always panic about it, we should always be vigilant. And I think something to take away from this is, if you are concerned about something, so if you have a concern about your health and your well-being, especially during a COVID environment where it's understood that delays to treatment and surgeries is going to cost the lives of many thousands of people, in terms of premature cancer-related deaths, that if you have a concern, go get it checked out. If a lot of people, especially young people, I think, due to the mindset of it's going to sound silly on the surface of it, young people do think that they're immortal, and I didn't understand this before I was ill, but after experiencing and having to come to terms with my own morality, you feel robbed of it in the sense that, as a young person, and I think to an extent the way society views us, we believe that nothing can harm us, and that we are infallible in a way, and because of that we may not always want to take our own health concerns seriously, or even worse from this, I think that can sometimes translate to, I think it comes from an honest place of people wishing the best for young people and not wanting to believe that such bad things can happen to young people. But I think that creates situations, and I've seen firsthand, the effects of this mentality where we, if somebody's approached with a young person who has a serious, they have a concern about their health, we want to largely reassure them and send them on their way, because statistically there isn't going to be anything wrong with them. And make way for, especially during the strain that the NHS is under at the minute, we want to make way for, perhaps people in situations like where they're slightly older, where the risk of it being more serious, like their concern, is more significant. But what I would say is to push. If that's the one thing I've learned, that it's to push and not to martyr yourself because you think you don't want to make a fuss. Everyone, your health is just as valid as anybody else's, and if you have a concern, then it's valid. If you are worried about something, then that worry is valid. And during this COVID pandemic, that's something that I would advise you hold on to. That's something you take to heart, especially now that having an early diagnosis, if there is something wrong, chances are if you go and get something checked out, you're going to be fine. I was just one of the unlucky ones. But on the off chance that something is wrong, having that early diagnosis is vital in putting you in the best position to get you well enough again. And yeah, I think that is the core of it. And I would say that from my personal experience, that comes with its own set of challenges, because getting diagnosed isn't always as simple as you might like to think it is. So hold on to that. And I think that's the core of what I'm trying to draw out from, based on the time, and I'm going to start wrapping up now, is still, from the waffle, is that's the message I'm trying to draw out. It's basically to pay attention to your body and look out for yourself and go get things checked out. So that's it pretty much for this first episode. Hopefully it was more accessible and you enjoyed it more. Feel free to hang around, share some feedback, and let me know if you preferred this sort of formatting, and I'll try and incorporate that in for next week when I film the next video. Hopefully I'll catch everyone at the stream there. I'm still trying to figure out how it all works, but feel free to come and stop around and just hang out, really. And yeah, hopefully enjoyed it, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. So take care, everyone.